So April 10th, Dawn asked me for the title of this talk today, and I was looking at this article, and it had a really great title called The Great Unraveling. And I'm like, oh, that's actually part of what I'll be talking about. So I wrote her back, The Great Unraveling. In the new design for living, it's important to use your awareness to unravel the programs that have had you in a trance of limitation for a very long time. Lo and behold, I did not realize then that I would go through the great unraveling first so that I could be with you today and share from this very real experience that I'm going to say I know others are going through, because it would be odd if I was the exception or the anomaly. I'd rather be one of the examples. I do have a program called The New Design for Living, and it is just a process of identifying the old and the new. We're all hearing these words, new earth, things are collapsing, right? We're all hearing these phrases. And so my program helps us understand what has been the old way that we've built our lives upon and our sense of self, and what is replacing that. And lately, I've been using the word program quite a bit because I am experiencing programs that I either absorbed or learned by example or learned with intention as I was growing up that became my foundation for how to live, what to value, and how to be in the world. And I do believe that, initially there was a real purity about those programs, and I do believe that initially the intention of those programs were pure and were in the right place. However, as it often is, over time, they became stagnant versions of themselves and did not grow, because programs ideally are not designed to grow. They're designed to be what they are. So the number one program under which all other programs fall is the program of separation. And in the new design model, that's replaced with the program of oneness. So once you accept that, or at least entertain that idea, you start to see how all these other programs fall under that one program that we are waking up to, for sure, is the program of separation. So within that today, I want to talk about a couple of programs that I have been personally shown so that I can be a match for the new design of Camille and the new design of Camille's life. I mean, you cannot throw out these big proclamations and affirmations and whatever declarations without realizing that you've taken a very large spoon, put it into the pot, and you have literally stirred up the contents of your life. And that is ideally what we're saying we want. Bring it up to the light of awareness until, of course, the moment in which it comes up and we are like, what on earth is this and why did I want it? So that's where I was at when Dawn asked me to speak today, and why I thought that title was so appropriate. The unraveling of the programs, the waking up from the trance that programs put us in as a result of repetition. You just keep doing something over and over again, right? What do they say? It becomes part of your subconscious, but also in this regard, it creates a bit of a trance. And a lot of us are waking up to the trance that we have been in. So here's how it happened back in April. I mean, the last 9 weeks, wow. All I can say is it has been an extraordinary experience of personal growth these last 9 weeks. It is all out there for us to bring into our personal experience so that we can have an expanded version of ourselves and an expanded version of the lives that we are living, the communities we are building, the relationships that we are nurturing. And it goes obviously out into our government, into society, and into the entire into the entire world. So I have been in the hospitality industry, and when I came to Anchorage in May of 22, I was in a traumatized state. And I was used to a very chaotic emergency room type environment, which was a cause to my personal experience. So when I got into the hospitality industry in May of 22, at least the restaurants I was working in, they were all like an emergency room because all these restaurants were just coming out of COVID and they were scrambling for sure. We were all going back as if there was something to go back to that was what we left. But of course, the infrastructure of these businesses were really in a rough place. But at the time, it was a match, and I was so traumatized that it just felt normal to me, and I was grateful for the job, and onward I went. However, last year, I got involved in energy work, which I believe is the new design model for healing. It is powerful, it is real, and it is extremely helpful in dealing with issues that talk therapy can't quite help us with anymore. So all of last year, I spent a lot of time, and it was a large commitment, as healing often is, to really go in, as Dawn said, do the deep dive, and really work on releasing and healing this trauma, because I want to be free. And again, when we say things like we want to be free, then everything that keeps us unfree comes rushing up for us to work with and take a look at. So as I healed, the environment I was in became less and less of a match. That's something that everybody's going through as well. We have changes within ourselves, and suddenly things that we were a part of or doing or people we hung out with is not a match anymore because we've grown beyond it. So I was definitely in that place of realizing this is coming to an end because I am no longer a match for this. And in the midst of that, though, I was seeing a lot of these programs that was keeping me in something that really wasn't, at that point, really in my highest and best good. But I was taught to stay in things. You know, when the toaster broke when I was a kid, we plugged it in one more time just to see if we could get one more slice of toast, right? So it's come on my own education to learn how to leave things or say no to things that don't ultimately serve me. And that is part of the new design model. So I went through all this, mental exercise about when to let go. And, as a manager, ideally you give 30 days notice. And I did that. The next day, I go to work and I have an experience of the program of loyalty in the new Design for Living. In the old Design for Living, my understanding of loyalty was other-centric. I was loyal to the other. Again, growing up in an Italian Catholic family, there was some beautiful service in that. When people would come or travel for far, my parents would offer their bedroom to them so that they would have ideal comfort for the night. We were in service to our family members. Whatever it was, our church, it was about the other, which is actually okay. However, what didn't happen is the education that that's actually one side of the loyalty coin, because I never really learned, because it wasn't part of the program, that the other side of that loyalty program is loyalty to, for, and of the self. In fact, in preparing for today, I had to really be real to myself that it's somewhere along the way, and this is not about blaming, this is just a story that I'm sharing with you. I take full responsibility for everything that's myself. However, the truth is, somewhere along the way, I was taught, modeled, however it became, that loyalty to the self is actually called selfish. Right. Anybody relate to that? Yeah. So, my gosh, who wants to be called selfish? So you went out of your way, I went out of my way, maybe unconsciously, to not do for me, because the program said loyalty is about the other. And you can imagine over time how many moments I didn't choose myself because of what the program was teaching me about that kind of choice. over time, through my spiritual education, my personal awakening, maturity, I've come to see that and begin to work with it. And there's little pieces I can see along the way where I said, oh no, I have to claim that back. Oh, wait a second, right? And certainly saying no to a job that wasn't working for me anymore was the beginning of, loyalty to the self. And guess what? Didn't really feel very good because I was experiencing the juice of an old program while I was in the midst of choosing a new way of doing things. So one day, I've given my notice, it's a month out, I go to work, and I work with a lot of young people. Initially, I was very excited to work with young people. I thought, oh, this is great. I've got all this knowledge and experience and wisdom, and I get to finally, I have no kids, I get to... I love these kids so much because they don't need me. They are on their own path. Sure, maybe they've confused information with experience, right? They can get anything they want online, just search it. And so I feel like that experience of getting information so easily has confused them a little bit about how that's different from experience. But okay, I was quick to realize, I guess I'm going to be learning from them. And I did. I learned from the baker, not the candlestick maker, the baker. So I'm having this whole internal experience of the program of loyalty, and I'm dealing with the feelings I have about leaving my job, because that's a trigger. Holy smokes, talk about the program of the job to a middle-class American. The job is almighty. You don't leave your job because you have an issue with your boss. Everybody has an issue with your boss. You stay. You got to get a good job. You need that job as source, basically. So I go to work. We have this young person who's been there, I think, maybe 3 weeks now. And at the end of her shift today, she's leaving. She's quitting and not coming back because that's quitting. Right? And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. We get to the end of the day. She's gone. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that she just walked out. All this stuff was coming up about loyalty. But wait a minute, what about this? And isn't she thinking about how that's going to impact the person that's going to remain? And all this programming coming up. And at home at night, lighting a candle to kind of process, because it really shook me at my core. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to follow her right out the door and tap her on the shoulder and say, can you tell me about this? What I realized that night is that she represented the new design for loyalty, because her loyalty was to herself. And that was a remarkable realization. And that was a remarkable and beautiful thing for me to come to realize. Because at 62 years old, it took a 20-something-year-old to give me the other side of the coin. Loyalty to the self. Seeing what that actually looked like. She wasn't other-centric. She wasn't considering how her immediate departure might affect the whole. Her commitment was to herself. And that rocked my world. It also, like a tsunami, brought up everything that wasn't already coming up around this idea of loyalty. So, of course, now my mind is like, you got to go back. You got to tell them you're not going to work the whole 30 days. Let me say something. I don't know about you, but my mind is the most entertaining aspect of my life. You know, we pay all these subscription fees to these streaming platforms for entertainment, like every day. Wow, what an imagination! Like it's mind-blowing to me how the mind works, which is why it's so important to be able to understand how your mind works and to follow that with understanding how your heart works. The language of the mind is not the language of the heart. One makes you feel constricted, the other makes you feel expansive. So my mind is like, you got to go back in. You got to tell them, you know what? I'm not giving you 30 days after all. I'm going to give you, this whole thing that happened. But that young woman's gesture turned a page for me. Now, maybe she too could use a balance. Maybe she too is only experiencing one definition and one side of loyalty. However, in that moment, that lesson that I received absolutely changed my life. And I thought that was the end, but it turns out that was the beginning of a very long roll through a whole lot more. But before I go on to the next program, I do just want to check in by just raising your hand. Is what I'm talking about relatable to you? Is anybody else able to really say, yeah, I know what you're talking about? Okay, I appreciate that because, sometimes when you're in a healing crisis, when you're in the experience of what got pushed down is coming up, it's very lonely. Thank goodness for friends who can hold space for you and listen to you when you're losing it. But for me, in the end, it is something that you have to go through by yourself. You have to learn, you don't have to do anything. I've learned how to sit in the midst of those kinds of eruptions and to be present and loving and compassionate for myself. Why? Because I've called it up. I have called it up. And when it comes up, I have to be present for it. So the next preparation I had for today's talk is also under the program of loyalty, but it's also the program of money and the program of the self. The other day, for some reason, though now I know why, I thought, let me go through these keys in this drawer and see if they unlock the few doors I have that have a key lock to them. And I thought to myself, well, I know that the office door locks because that's where I used to store my things when I rented my home. And I think they were striped and colored. And so I was going through all the keys and I found the two that opened the office door. And that's really the studio door where I have my equipment. I do my podcast. My printer is there. So it's an important room for my everyday living. And so I found them. Oh, that's so great. I put them on a separate keychain and walked out of the room. Now, later on that night, I closed that door like I always do at night, just for the purpose of heat. And I didn't realize that the door was still in lock mode. Yeah. So the next morning, I have a meeting with someone, and the bag that I need is in there. And I go in there, as I do every morning, to open the door, but it's locked. And so I immediately realize what I've done. And then I think, oh, but you have the keys. And then I immediately realize that they are sitting on the desk in the room of the locked door. I don't have a whole lot of time, but guess what's coming up right away? Shame. Guess what's coming up right away? The narrative of how stupid. What is that? That is when we separate from ourselves. And the programs that we have grown up with, at least the ones I have, at the core of them, most of the time, it's separation of the self to the self. So when I talk about the program of separation, it's not just to each other. The real part that we're in right now is how are we separate from ourselves? And when I looked back on all of this, for me, the separation was inherent in the programming. And this is part of the Great Awakening that we are in right now. Claiming back those selves, those versions of ourselves that we gave away because the program told us that the outer world knew better than the inner world. That the outer authority was a greater authority than the one at the center of our own beingness. That the instructions and the directions for life, successful life, were coming from outside. And so this is part of what I feel is the great collapse because we're waking up and realizing, oh, wait a second, holy smokes, it's not out there, it's in here. And as you start to realize that, all these places where you've given up yourself or your power or your sense of value or worth or whatever it is becomes realized, and we have an opportunity to bring that back to ourselves. So I head off to this meeting and I'm thinking about the door all the time, of course, and I come back to the house and I start calling locksmiths. And I called the first locksmith, and they said $60. I'm like, oh my God, $60. I called the second locksmith, $80. $80. Now I'm starting to get riled up, and I'm starting to rail. $80? I called the last guy, which was the best guy, because guess what he said? I'm going to cut you a break today. I thought, well, finally, $100. This is going in the wrong direction. But what I can see now that I didn't understand was at work then was the program of got to get a better deal. Got to get a better price. I wasn't in a program that said, Camille, you matter, you're of value, and the easiest and quickest way for you to unlock that door so you can go on with your day and live your life is what you should do. No, that's not the program I was living in. The program I was living in was I am not going to pay for these people to spend 10 seconds in my home and open the door. And again, from this point, I can see what was running the show was that money was more valuable than I was. And let me tell you, this stuff for me is painful. This is painful stuff. Why? Because in the realization of what was happening, I understood that the value of money caused me, for the majority of my life, to make choices that didn't have my best interest at hand, didn't value me. So all those moments along the way when I made a choice outside of my best interest, when you have these realizations, what happens? There's me, and then there's the separated me out there. In the moment of realizing it, that me being recognized comes rushing towards me. And as it's rushing back home, guess what it's sweeping up and bringing with it? Every choice I made in which I didn't value myself. And that is where the pain is. Because every one of those moments, whether I was aware of it or not, pushed something down. And that thing was me. And when that moment of realization happened on Friday morning, the literal pain, like contractions, because I guess there was a birth happening, of that squeeze of all those moments, oh my gosh, it was so painful as it approached my heart. And it was heartbreaking, really, when I realized how many times I didn't choose me. And in my family of origin, who's also in a trance of that program, how many times they didn't choose me. And let me tell you what, that was very painful. All the times when I was second to money in a family situation. Painful stuff. But I don't know any other way to do this work than to allow that to come through me again. And you know, we've been around a while. We've been told it comes out with the same frequency that it went in. It's not like, oh, this is so much fun. All this pain is coming out and I'm feeling so great about it. No, that wasn't it at all, you know? So back to the door, because it gets so much better than this. So entertaining. I say, no, I'm not doing it. So what do I do next? I go on Facebook. Does anybody know a locksmith cheaper or less expensive than $80? Wow, I went on Facebook. So somebody responds, my friend Tammy. And the exchange basically is, you can drill a hole in that lock and open the door. I'm like, I'm on it. That's how I'm going to open the door. I'm going to go to her house in between my job. I'm going to get her drill. I'm going to get her bits. I'm going to come home and I'm going to drill a hole in the key lock because it's on YouTube and I'll be able to do it. And that door's going to be open. And I won't pay those people $80, $100, $60 to come in 10 seconds, put a thing in there and open my door. What's happening all this time? Stress is building. Stress is building. Stress is building. Why? Because Friday is show day, and I'm not in the office yet. And now it's 8 o'clock at night, and I got to drill in some bits, and I'm exhausted. And I'm like, you're a triple Aries. Probably not a good time to plug in a drill right now. Let's do it in the morning after you rest and calm down. But I'm thinking, how am I going to get in there? I got to work tomorrow. I'm going to... So I call my friend Curtis, Captain Curtis, who puts on his cape and shows up at my door and just makes things happen. But he can't come in until Friday. All the while, all I had to do was call up one of the locksmiths and say, come back over. But the pull of the program was so strong that it never occurred to me until the next morning when I had my complete and total cracking open, like a volcano, like a force. This thing came rushing out. I ended up calling Dawn, and it was great that she just held space for me because I needed someone to just anchor the unbelievable discomfort that I was dealing with as a result of realizing what was happening. And in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, I valued money more than myself. So I have this massive healing crisis. This stuff is coming up. The self that I threw out there years ago is rushing back towards me, bringing every decision I ever made and anybody else made about this. And I am just in a heap. I am in a heap. As this is subsiding like a contraction, as I was being born from my own self, I hear a knock on the door. And who is there? Captain Curtis arrives with a crowbar and some other gadget, and I'm like, well, this is symbolic. I feel like I have just been crowbarred open. So he's like, where's the door? So he goes downstairs, and this little big dog follows him, and he's on his knees, and now he's putting the crowbar, because the door frame is such that the door is behind it. So you can't slip anything through it. And he's on the bottom about to pop an aspect of the door frame out. And of course I say, what are you doing? And he knows me well enough not to answer and just keep going. Right? And so I run upstairs thinking I have something that he needs. Okay. 30 seconds later, I'm back down and the door is open. Told you I could get it open in less than 30 seconds. Love ya. And out the door he goes. Oh my God. And I just stood there realizing, oh, I get it. This isn't intelligence that's for me. Because suddenly the whole thing with the door felt like it was an orchestrated situation for me to have a necessary healing, a large, major, necessary healing that revealed to me and unveiled to me a program that I cannot be in anymore if I'm really going to have a new version of myself, if I'm really going to have a new version of my life, if I'm really going to be this free person and talk about the new design for living. And it was such a great metaphor, right? He unlocked the door at the moment that I had unlocked the door of my consciousness. And there are the keys sitting on my desk. I was just like, wow. Of course, I took the keys and brought them upstairs and put them in the drawer next to the refrigerator, just in case. Just in case that ever happened again. So when we talk about the Great Unraveling, for me, this is the really important work that we're doing right now. Most of us here are, 40 or older, right? It would appear that at this time in our lives, we've got a lot of these things already figured out. And maybe there are some of you in the room that, though appreciate this story, are beyond it. And wow, please come up to me and give me a big hug so that I know what's, yet to be. But I do want to encourage everybody today, and maybe your programs are coming up during this talk. Maybe you're aware of something that you can see limits you, or constricts you, or confines you, or makes you separate from yourself. And certainly last year was the beginning of me seeing myself and what I needed as valuable and important and what I was here to say yes to. But now that I look out and see all the little subtle ways in which I have made the other more valuable than myself, all I can do now is rush in and correct that. So I do feel that this healing is complete. In this particular area, I don't know that there's necessarily more, because the experience was so comprehensive and went so far back. I mean, we're talking ancestors, right? When my Italian grandparents came over to America, everything that they had, all the programs were there to help them survive. We're there to help them be community together. But what's happening right now, because we're the architects, as we claim back our power, we have the opportunity to reprogram our programs. And if you've done it already for yourself, then continue to be the model for everybody else. Because this is what is happening. The program of sides, that's another one that is in our faces. That's not working anymore either. People realizing, wait a second, time out. I'm for humanity. I don't want to be, we can have our preferences and we certainly have our opinions, but how are we living at the core of our being? Because I tell you, and you know this, you step onto the path of oneness, that's a massive game changer. Massive. Why? Because the program of oneness has its own program. The program of oneness has its own narratives. The program of oneness has its own characters and storyline. And it's a very, very different one from the program of separation. And it's like conditional separation. Okay, I'm not separate from you because you agree with me. You over here, oh my gosh, I can't. Well, that's very conditional. But it works for us because we're still finding our way on this new road that doesn't have instructions, because where our heart is the GPS. So I hope that there's been something here that has helped you and helped us as a community. I hope that the journey I've taken has done some of the work for you. But I do want to encourage you to be brave, to be bold, and to be willing to sit with yourself and allow these old programs to reveal themselves to you so you can release them. We've got a new moon coming up. I can't imagine a better time than to look at the programs that maybe have been running your life, your relationship to your job. I mean, it populates everything. There's no place where a program is not, whichever one that we're talking about. Or if you don't like the word program, use your own word. The design, the way, how I was brought up, whatever it is, however you describe it, that's yours to do. So I want to thank you for your love and attention this morning. I am open to some thoughts or questions with regards to what is being activated in you. Thank you.